You guys requested we do a deep dive on the Johnny Gosch case, and, well, frankly, it's one that stuck with me for years.
Yeah.
It's not just another true crime story. This goes deep, you know what I mean? Every parent's worst fear. It's 1982. Imagine a Sunday morning, beautiful day in West Des Moines, Iowa. Johnny Gosch, he's 12, heads out on his paper route, like he's done 100 times before, right? But, and this is the scary part, this time he just vanishes.
And what gets me is it wasn't like a bad neighborhood or even, late at night. This was broad daylight, a safe community, or so everyone thought. I mean, that's what's so unsettling about this case, wouldn't you say? The fact that it was just a normal morning makes Johnny's disappearance even more scary.
Yeah, totally. And to make it worse, there weren't any strong leads early on. A few people said they saw Johnny talking to a guy in a blue car, but that's it.
Yeah.
That detail, vague as it is, it's become this huge symbol of the case,
Sure.
A ghost of a clue that's haunted investigators all these years.
All right, the blue car. Talk about a nightmare. And besides that car, the early investigation was a dead end. No struggle, no ransom note, nothing.
So because there weren't a lot of facts, a lot of theories popped up. The simplest explanation, and it's a scary thought, is that Johnny was just taken by a stranger.
Yeah, it's the one that needs the least assumptions, that's for sure. But it also makes you wonder why Johnny. Was he just in the wrong place at the wrong time? Or was something else going on, something planned out?
Which leads to an even darker possibility, sex trafficking.
Sadly, it's a horrible reality, and it was back then too. And, it's important to remember that Johnny's mom, Noreen Gosch, that's actually what she thought early on. Her gut feeling, her absolute refusal to believe Johnny was just gone, that became a huge part of this whole thing.
And to make things worse, around the time Johnny disappeared, other kids went missing too. And some of them, it's eerie how similar the cases are. They were never officially linked, but it makes you wonder, could there have been someone, targeting kids back then?
Man, that's a chilling thought, isn't it? Someone lurking around, taking kids. Ugh. And the idea that there might be a connection to these other cases, it just adds another layer to this whole thing.
And all of that, on top of years of nothing, false leads, and the family not knowing, and the whole community, they were desperate for answers. We can't talk about the Johnny Gosch case without talking about his mom, Noreen. She was incredible, just incredible. After Johnny disappeared, she was a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, Noreen, she couldn't accept not knowing what happened. So instead of letting the grief consume her, she turned it into action. I can't even imagine to go through something like that and then, turn it into a fight for justice, not just for Johnny, but for all the missing kids out there. It's incredible.
And she didn't just raise awareness, she went further. She started the Johnny Gosch Foundation. It's amazing. It was a lifeline for families going through the same thing.
Oh yeah, that foundation was huge. Back then, remember, there wasn't social media or the internet like we have now. So the foundation, it gave these families support, resources, a way to connect with each other. Noreen, she knew how important that was, to connect and make their voices heard. Because a lot of times, these families, they felt ignored.
And you can't forget what she did for law enforcement. Noreen, she pushed for changes, big changes in how they handled missing kids' cases.
Right. She saw how the initial response to Johnny's case, it was just slow, bogged down by red tape. And nobody seemed to get how urgent it was to find this kid. What Noreen did, it forced everyone to take these cases seriously. And that's how it should be.
She really did change the way things were done. But even with all that work, Noreen never gave up hope of finding Johnny. And that leads us to, a really strange part of this story. 1997, this young guy shows up, says he's Johnny.
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
All those years? And then?
Yeah, and get this, he even looked a lot like Johnny. And he knew things that only Johnny could know. You have to wonder what Noreen was thinking. Relief, disbelief, hope. After all that time, it must have been overwhelming. But there were some issues, right?
Yeah, there were parts of his story that didn't add up. He said he'd been kidnapped, made to live under a new name, but there wasn't any proof. Nothing concrete.
So another dead end, another cruel trick. It's still a mystery what happened in that meeting.
It shows you, in these kinds of cases, the line between hope and, the opposite, and the truth. It'd be so hard to see. Noreen, she had to deal with a whole new set of questions, doubts, and that awful possibility that her son, maybe, was still out there.
It's with this case, the more we find out, the less we know. So that brings us to the documentary, Who Took Johnny? It came out in 2006, and, it brought the case back into the spotlight, but it also kind of went somewhere even darker. You know what I mean? They started looking at organized crime.
Yeah, they did. They were looking into like allegations that maybe Johnny's abduction was connected to, I don't even want to say it, but like child pornography rings, stuff like that. It's really disturbing.
It is. And, for Noreen, it must have been especially hard. She always felt like something like that was a possibility.
It makes you think about the worst parts of humanity, the things people don't want to talk about. And the documentary, well, it didn't really prove anything for sure,
Right.
but it definitely made people wonder.
For sure. And it's still something people think about. Even now, all these years later, Johnny Gosch's disappearance is still an open case.
It's a reminder, that even though we try our best, sometimes terrible things happen and we don't always get answers.
Yeah, it's true. But even with all the tragedy, there's still hope, right? Like, what about DNA? They can do so much with it now.
Definitely. I mean, DNA has changed everything about these kinds of investigations. Cases that were cold for years, they're being solved because of DNA. It could be a game changer here, too.
Yeah, maybe even some closure for the family after all this time. It's hard to imagine what they've gone through.
It really is. But hey, you never know. Maybe something will come up.
So here we are, at the end of our deep dive into Johnny Gosch's disappearance, and it feels like, we have even more questions than we did before. What happened that morning? Was it random or was it planned? We may never know the full story, but one thing's for sure, the truth is out there somewhere.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And to Johnny's case, it reminds us to be careful, to be aware, and to keep fighting for what's right, just like Noreen Gosch did. Because every kid deserves to be safe, every family deserves answers, and we can't stop searching for the truth.
That's right. We can't forget Johnny, and we can't forget all the others who've disappeared.